Hello and welcome to Happy, Healthy, and Skeptical. We are your hosts, Christy Palermo and Jennifer Hobson. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. And today we're actually talking about acceptance to change. And I have a question to start this off for you, Jen. And I know you've seen this a lot with coaching clients or building your team, but then in personal life too. What are some things that you've seen? Why do you think so many people are resistant to change?
Change is it's a scary word for most people, and I think that's part of it. They associate change with fear. That's immediately their thought. Something's changing, so it's going to be, and then you go to the word different, right? Changes makes me have the physical response of fear, the emotional response of fear, and because we think it's going to be different, when in reality, yes, change can be hard and challenging, but change can also be beautiful. And I think what I've seen as personally and as a coach is people don't know how to identify how this change will live in their life go forward and how much energy they should give to it. And also the idea of, for our control freaks, I'll raise my hand here, right? I'm a recovering control freak. For those people, it's hard to relinquish control, and the thought of change means they're no longer in the driver's seat. That's what I see time and time again, especially personally. And I've evolved a lot on that. And I kind of really embrace change at this point because, it's worked out in my favor every time. It might have not exactly gone the way that I had planned. And then for the people that I coach, I really encourage them to be open to change.
So how do you coach people through embracing change?
I mean, I think there's a couple of steps, right? There's in anything that you're trying to coach through, you have to have some acknowledgement. And sometimes you have to ask that person and even yourself for open communication, right? Are they open to what you want to share with them? I think that's important. And first of all, identifying the idea that you cannot avoid change. Change is inevitable. We wake up, we go to sleep, we wake up the next day, that's a change. So change is inevitable. So first acknowledging the fact that we can't avoid it. Change is going to happen no matter what. No matter what we do, we cannot avoid that. And then you kind of go into acceptance. I think it's acceptance of the situation, right? And I think it's the idea of, we've talked about it before. You can forgive someone in a situation, but that doesn't necessarily you allow them back into your life. So it's whatever level of change. If it's something that's a change for the negative, you can accept it and then make another change to not allow it to continue. Because wallowing is also not going to serve you. You have to accept the fact that that change has occurred and then go, you know what? Well, I'm going to make another change that's going to make it the negative into a positive. So I think acceptance is huge. You have to trust the journey. Not everything is going to look the way you thought it would. And that includes the big question of life, right? And that includes, your family life. It includes your business, your entrepreneur ventures. It includes all the things that you have this vision for. It's a vision, and I'm sure it's a little blurry around the certain lines, and that's for a reason, right? You're not going to truly know what it looks like until it shows up. I think for you, Chrissy, you've done a lot of things that you've wanted to in life and you enjoy them. But when you look down the future, you're living a vision you had, but you might not have known it would be in the part of Florida that you're in, right? You might not have known what your kids were actually going to look like, what you were actually going to name them, right? You knew those are the things that you wanted, but the vision was a little blurry. And when things aren't going according to plan, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it's new. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because there's two versions of change. There's the change that you accept, and there's the change that you embrace. And accepting change doesn't mean that the change was good for you. Embracing the change, going, you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to make it work for me. I think so many of us are still fearful of what change can do for us. And it's all things. I think for me, I don't know if I've shared this on this podcast before, but my husband had been laid off. I think it had been 4 different times in 7 years. That was out of his control, right? Full out of his control. And that can definitely mess with your mindset, and you can go, oh my God, it must be me, which I mean, really in reality, when we know certain industries, they just suffer in different ways, but going, oh, well, it's me. Oh, I don't belong doing that. Or, what do I do now? Do I stay here? Do I do something else? Well, for us, we're like, hey, this is a great time. We eventually wanted to move back to New England. So let's take the opportunity and let's make it happen. If we hadn't have taken that opportunity, I don't know where we would be right now. Not that it would have been bad, but now we've lived in New England for 7 years. I mean, we literally did as much change in a 2 year span that anyone could do, right? We got married, we bought a house, we moved states, we had a child, we did all the things, got married literally in 2 years. So that's the other thing. Change is not going to be universal. I don't even know if that's the right word. It's not going to come in unison, is really what I mean to say. It's not going to be change today, change tomorrow. Sometimes it's going to be a whole lot of change at one time, and then things are going to be stagnant for a little bit. And sometimes it shows up whenever you want. I know people always believe in that, the rule of three, things change in threes. That's not always true. Don't rely on that rule, and really change your vision. I'm using the word change your vision from this is going to be negative and I can't control this change to this is an opportunity for me to embrace what's happening and turn it into a positive. Or if you really can't turn into a positive, it's time to become more resilient.
You made so many great points in there. And I love that you gave that example with your family because I think many people can relate to a big, major life change moment in time or season of life, I guess, where a lot of things are changing at once. And right, being laid off like a number of times, there's so many places that your brain can go with that. But the fact that you guys were able to embrace it and right, like you moved back to where you wanted to, where you could have just kept looking at it as like, woe is me, which I mean, that's a hard thing. That is a hard thing to deal with for sure.
You have to give it some time to settle. I truly believe that, right? You have to accept that, give it a little bit of time, but then you have to decide, okay, this isn't going to be where I live in this negative headspace.
That's exactly what I was going to add in, is that I think that's the last piece of it is, first of all, I like that you mentioned the 2 points of change that you can look at it, embracing it versus maybe not versus accepting it, but it could be 2 different ways that you're looking at it. But also taking that moment of really just letting it settle, as you're saying, letting it absorb into what's happening. Because I guess it's like with anything major that happens in our life that sometimes can end up being more traumatic down the line if we don't deal with it now. So I think major change can be something really traumatic if we don't absorb it and really pay attention to what's happening in the moment and letting it marinate, I guess is a word that comes to mind, letting it marinate within yourself. And that's where I always come back to my journaling and sitting with my emotions. And I like to think about, okay, how am I like physically feeling about this thing that's happening? And sometimes it's more of a positive feel than you expect. Like, oh, I guess it's more of a relief than I was expecting for this type of change. And then sometimes it's really sickening and you're like, okay, this does not feel good. Now I know I need to make a shift here, or I need to pivot and find a different path to go on. But I think really dialing in with like your physical reaction to what's happening can give you a path of the next path of a place to go.
Yeah, I mean, you use the word trauma, and I think that's why people initially, no matter what kind of change, lean towards fear, because we do experience traumas, right? We experience loss, we experience, endings of relationships, we experience, I don't want to say the change in jobs, but sometimes jobs are taken away, right? With the thing that we thought we were meant to do, we're not feeling successful at. So I think that's why we innately associate change with fear. And even changing the mindset and going, well, change is also, I got that promotion. Change is also, I got to have that baby that I wanted. Change is, I get to live in the house that I want, or I get to walk in the neighborhood that I want. And I took a different route, right? There's different forms of change. When we do experience the trauma and the really hard ones, I think you're right. We have to actually feel the emotions. There's a lot of people out there that internalize it, right? And then 5 years from now, they're maybe in a new relationship and they don't know why they're behaving a certain way. And it's because that really hard thing that they experienced before, when it changed immediately, They didn't deal with it. So I do think embracing change is that part of that dealing and really experiencing what the change is. It doesn't mean that has to be your forever, because we know change is inevitable, so it's going to change again. But I think we also need to take some time and go to, am I fearing change, or do I just have fears? Am I afraid of certain things that are going to happen? And sometimes we're self-sabotaging. Did I say that right? Self-sabotaging with those things. We're putting those fears out there. And then when it happens, we go, oh, here comes that dreadful change again. No, you constantly focus on the fears and you put them out into the universe. If you gave your energy to the fears over and over again, so that change, that was inevitable. But that negative change is also inevitable, because that's where you were putting your energy. And I truly believe in the energy that you put out there. And it's not a perfect science, we know that. But the energy you put out there, how you show up for yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you talk to others, that is also going to be a part of that inevitable change. It's going to directly, I don't even know, it's going to directly affect how that change shows up for you time and time again. We know those people, and every time we talk to them, they talk about, oh, well, this happened and this happened and this happened, and they're approaching them as all these negative changes. They never have anything positive, but they're also not putting the light or the positivity out there when they see people, right? They're not congratulating other people. They're not saying that they're worth something, right? They're not even speaking life into themselves. And that is so detrimental, right? You're actually predicting the negative change that's going to happen to you. And you think you don't know it, when in reality, you do, because you're the one that indicated it was going to happen.
Right. It's a way of looking into the future.
It is, right? Where I know you've said it before, like, we're not future tellers. However, we can identify patterns. And if you feel
That's
like
where
you're
you hit the nail on the head. Yes.
If you feel like you're a person where these patterns, these things are happening to you, right? To you over and over again. Well, first of all, maybe you need to identify the fact that they're happening for you, because someone somewhere in this universe is trying to tell you something. They're trying to remind you.
That's where I was going to go with it, is that sometimes that is a sign, and that's taking that inventory of a personal inventory, whether it be to meditate, to journal, to go for a walk, let it figure out what the heck's going on here. But it might be a lesson that you're needing to learn in life that you're just not getting. And I have definitely had those lessons where
Like,
I
why
feel
does this
like
keep happening to me? And there's something
bashed over the head with it.
Jen, like, come on, get it together. Are you not? Hello, I literally wrote it and you're still not understanding it. And that's happened to all of us, right? We just got to get knocked in the head a few too many times. And then we go, all right, now it's time to change my pattern, time to change my habits, time to change the way that I show up. That's the change I get to control. There's the change we can't control, and there's the change that we can't. There's the inevitables. And I think for us, like I said, us recovering control freaks, it's that idea that sometimes relinquishing control, being vulnerable, being open, those are our challenges. And that comes up a lot when you're trying to change and grow, really, right? It's not just change, but you're looking to grow as a person. And with growth, I will tell you, things change all the time. And you have to be open to go, hey, you know what? An opinion I had 5 or 10 years ago, I don't have that opinion anymore. Or maybe something that I've done before, I have to take stock and go, hey, you know what? I have to apologize for how I showed up there. So I think the last part, really, to answer your first question, is what I work on a lot personally and with clients, is really the idea of, it's important to embrace change to get the life that you've wanted and to achieve the things that you want to achieve. And sometimes with change comes shock, right? Sometimes we're shocked, sometimes there's anger, and then we have to turn into acceptance and commitment to that change. And it might be commitment to continuing to accept it, or commitment to making another change in the right direction. So change is inevitable. You have to be open to it. And if you're not, you're going to be very continually frustrated.
That word right there, frustrated. Frustration can come, it can stem and brew into something so much more if you're not aware of what's going on around the change. So I think you make a great point there. So, but I'm loving this conversation. I would love for anybody listening to this, join in our conversation to keep this going, because we know you're dealing with these things, the same things we're dealing with as we have these conversations every week. And we like to keep it open to you all. So find us on Instagram at Happy Healthy Skeptical, and we'll see you next time.